A very warm welcome and welcome back to season 2 of the AB1GK podcast. We had a huge success with season 1 last year, and as summer approaches, we want to bring you back our AB1GK podcast. And for this season, I'm going to be joined once again by our brand owner, Asmir Begović.
Martin, it's a pleasure to be with you. We had a really good end to season 1. We had a great season overall. I mean, the guests were amazing, and I ended up joining you for a couple of the last episodes, and it was a lot of fun. So we thought, why not try and get us both on for as many episodes of season 2 as we possibly can. So I'm really excited about it, and obviously we're going to start it with a bang. We've got Paul Robinson as our first guest of season 2, and it doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, I'm really excited to speak to Paul, actually. Like, he's had an incredible career. He's played at some of the biggest clubs in the world. And he went on and played in the golden generation with England, didn't he? He played in one of the sort of like best England sides of the last 20 years. So it'd be interesting to talk to him about England and his time with that. It would probably mixed emotion there, I would think.
Yeah, I can't wait to touch on that. That's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, you think back of his career. I mean, Leeds, we could talk to him for days about, I'm sure, what happened at Leeds and the situation there, and obviously he was at Spurs, Blackburn, finished off at Burnley. So, and as you rightly mentioned, his incredible years with England. So, can't wait to talk to him. I know he's done a couple of things for us with the brand. He's a great brand ambassador for us. So, a great person to have on, and we're going to look forward to having as many interesting people, on this season. I guess what we're also going to try and do is we're going to try and get a couple of different people from different fields in the game. Because I think a lot of this relates to goalkeeping and just professionalism, professional athletes in general, what they can do to improve their games or, improve their lifestyle. So it's something we're really, as a brand, going to try and do. And we're going to talk a lot about goalkeeping gloves. So that's the way it is. And, we're just hopeful that everyone's going to enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm so excited for season 2. Let's get straight into it. Paul, thank you very much for joining us today on the AB1GK podcast. You two have something major in common as well, don't you? 2 goalkeepers here, and they've both scored in the Premier League. 6 goalkeepers have scored in the Premier League, and you two are 2 of those.
Yeah, it's not a bad achievement. It's funny though, when you get to my age, you look back, you had a great career, but all people want to talk to you about now is the 2 goals that you scored. And it's when people come up to you in the street and they say, "Oh, do you know what? I was there when you scored that goal." And you look at them and they're like 30, 40, married with 2 kids, and they turn around and go, "I was 11.
Yours, Paul, was against Watford at White Hart Lane, wasn't it? Ben Foster in goal as well.
Yeah, I got 2, didn't I? I got 1 for Leeds in the League Cup, and I got one in the Premier League as well. So I mean, the Leeds one was a little bit more intentional than the Spurs one. Spurs one was just a lucky punt downfield.
Asmir, was yours a lucky punt downfield as well?
It was, yeah. Listen, I'm not gonna pretend like it was something else, Martin. It's nice to be part of that club with Robo, so that's fantastic. But yeah, I mean, we got to look. I got certainly a little bit of luck with the wind and the pitch and everything. So the funniest thing about that was I didn't know what to do with myself. But even the better part was I had Artur Borch as my teammate a few years later. So that was a little bit awkward at first after I met him. Robo, did you ever then play with Ben Foster? Were you with England or anything? Was it ever brought up?
Mate, it was funny because I wasn't playing well at the time. I was getting a lot of stick for the criticism for my performances, and Ben Foster was the young prodigy. He was the next one in line to take my job, if you like.
Right.
And the week after that game, we had an international meet. We had an England squad get together. So all before that game, it was like me versus Foster. The young prodigy taking over my job because I wasn't playing particularly well. And then I went and stuck a goal past him. So it was quite surreal, actually.
How did he take it?
Oh, mate, it was just one of them. I said to him after the game. But Ben was he overthinks things at times. I mean, he's in hindsight now as he's older. I think he'd look at it differently. I think he didn't enjoy it. But I mean, it's not one of them that you rub in, is he? He used to apologise straight away and say, I think it made more fun around the England team dressing room than it did between the 2 of us.
I love it. Well, listen, Rob, it's a pleasure to have you on our podcast. I guess first thing we want to talk about is your career. And we want to take it back to the beginning of your career. I mean, how did you get into goalkeeping? What was the inspiration and the idea behind getting into goalkeeping for you?
I went down to training when I was 8. Football was something that I loved from an early age. And just went down to an under-10s team, 2 years above my age, because I've always been big and tall for a youngster. So I went down to the under-10s, and the manager there, he went, right, how many goalkeepers have we got here? Nobody put the hand up. So I'm thinking, he says, right, who wants to go in goal? I'm thinking, I've got a chance of getting in the team here. So like that, little 8-year-old sticks his hand up, and it snowballed from there. I mean, I played rugby when I was younger, so the hand-eye coordination was always good, and hand-eye coordination is something that I'd always had, and I really enjoyed playing in goal, and it stuck from there, and progressed through the Sunday leagues here in England, playing like grassroots football, and ended up at York City when I was 12, which was the first time I really had a goalkeeper coach. So as you know, when you're younger, at my age, when you first start, even now, I talk to some parents, and it's very, very difficult for kids to get specific goalkeeping coaching. There are coaches out there who do courses, but you have to go and find them. If you play for a team, it's very rare that they have a specialist goalkeeper coach unless you picked up by a professional team. So I think it wasn't until about the age of 12, 13 that I actually got my first real goalkeeping coach.
Goalkeeping coaches are so important, aren't they, as well? In that stage of getting a goalkeeping coach, did that really then your game really start to develop, or go to the next level at that stage?
Yeah, I think looking back, you did. And I think, you think now goalkeeping coaches, it's so specific. It's, goalkeepers now are taught to play out from the back with the feet. And there's so much emphasis brought on, some coaches think they can get away with not having a goalkeeper coach at a Sunday league level, at a younger level, because they can just integrate the goalkeepers and let them play with their feet. Yeah, which is a huge part of the game. But the art of goalkeeping is completely separate. So the advice you give to a younger goalkeeper or a parent of a younger goalkeeper is, if you can find some specific goalkeeping training, it's going to bring the youngster on without a shadow of a doubt, because it is so specific, it's so niche.
It's incredible you say that, because I'm sure, as you do, we get asked questions all the time. What should my son or daughter be doing?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest advice I give them, is to make sure you try and get that coaching and that specific goalkeeper coaching, because I go back in my career, and I was lucky I had my dad from basically when I was born, because he was in the game. He was teaching me everything that I needed to know. And so even when I play the game today, I'm still thinking of what I did 30 years ago, what he was teaching me. So the fundamentals, as you say, of the actual goalkeeping art, haven't really changed. Now, of course, there's things you add on, and the game has developed 100%. But the goalkeeping techniques of, your catches and your footwork is still something you need to learn right away. So it's definitely something that I would recommend to all kids and parents to get as soon as you possibly can, really.
There's a lot of people that get carried away now, isn't there? I mean, you're still playing, you've developed through the game. I mean, when I played, the game changed so much, from putting the ball down on the 6-yard line to kicking it as far as you can, to then playing out from the back. I mean, the stuff that goalkeepers do now, Cruyff turns on the edge of the box and, passing it across the 6-yard line. My manager would have taken me off, would have substituted me back in the day. But I mean, there is that side of the game. But I think, like what you say, there is a huge element of actually forgetting what goalkeeping's about keeping the ball out the back of the net first. Yes, there is another side to it, but the actual art of goalkeeping has never changed.
100%, and that's exactly where I see it, because those fundamentals, those sort of basics of the game, is what gives you that base to really kick on from there. And then I think if you have that, as the game's developed and gotten bigger, and there's so many different layers to it now, you add those layers, but on a strong base, and those fundamentals are there. And I think people now get a little bit too carried away with doing, like you said, a little bit crazier stuff, but actually forget the basics of the game. And it's like, well, he plays good with his feet, but when it comes down to it, every goalkeeper, coach will still look at, okay, can he be effective goalkeeper for our team? And the same with managers. So I think it's a huge part of the game. But Robo, going back, so you go to York, you obviously get your first bit of goalkeeper coaching that you call influential in your career. You then joined Leeds at 16, and then I think that's where things really started to take off from there.
Yeah, I left school at 16 as an apprentice. So I was at Leeds a little bit before, then played schoolboy football, and then you got to the point of whether they were going to offer you an apprenticeship or not. And you think back and you look back in hindsight, it was a big risk to take. I mean, I left school at 16. Yes, I got GCSEs. I got all my GCSEs behind me. But at that level, you're thinking, there's other kids going on to A-levels, university. And I left home for £37.50 a week. And it's a chance that you take to sweep dressing rooms, to clean boots, and to have an apprenticeship. And I mean, it paid dividends at the time, but it is a big risk that you do take. And for me, you leave your family. We were the first intake into the new training ground. So Leeds' training ground at the time was revolutionary. It was one of the first that was built in the country. and they built a hostel on the premises for us, and we were the first intake there to actually live on site. So it was a bit like going to boarding school, but when you were 16, it was like moving to uni, but it wasn't actually the learning process. I mean, we used to go to college one day a week. We had to jump on the bus and go into Leeds and go to college. But the actual process was getting up in the morning, helping the kit man prepare the kit for the pros coming in, making sure you were assigned 2 pros, so you had to have their boots and gloves, whatever it was, ready. And then when they were all done and they were out training, you train at the same time. After lunch, they would all disperse. They'd go home. You'd do your gym session, and then your job was to tidy up. And you have to clear the dressing rooms, clear the laundry, do the boot room, do the boots, clear the medical room, all the jobs that nobody actually sees, as well as training. So for me at the time, it was a huge risk to leave school for that, but it was obviously one that paid dividends because I was in such a good intake of players. I mean, that Leeds U team that I was part of was something really special.
You talk about those sacrifices, Paul, to become a professional goalkeeper, professional player, playing at the highest level, the sacrifice is huge, isn't it? Not just being away from your family, but the way you live your life. I expect your mates are out meeting new girls, out drinking, all these things. I guess you've got to stop and focus on your game. Was it difficult?
There is a lot of focus. I mean, but when I first started, and Asmir will tell you, and so much credit to him for playing now, because the game has changed so much now. Now you have to dedicate your life to it. It's not just thinking about what you can do 2 days before a game, or midweek would have a day off. When I first started, Wednesday would always be a day off, and Thursday, Friday you'd prepare for a game, and then you'd start switching on thinking about a game. Whereas now you have to think about every meal that you eat, every drink that you drink, at what time you're doing it. It's now more of a lifestyle than it's ever been. I mean, Asmir is but more qualified to answer this question than me, but going into the Leeds United training ground, there's a set of scales in the morning. And Marcelo Bielsa used to weigh the players every single morning. He used to check them every single day. The sports science in the game now has gone to a completely different level. Yes, the players are rewarded heavily now, but the sacrifices that they have to make, it makes me laugh a little bit, because the players are under the spotlight, under scrutiny so much. Recently, Scott McTominay, after Man United's disappointing result against Arsenal, he went to the boxing on the Saturday night, the Tyson Fury fight, and he was criticised for that. And I'm thinking, why? He's doing nothing wrong. He's done his work for the day. He's got a day off tomorrow. He's not drinking. He's not causing trouble. But just because his team's lost, he gets criticised. So players have to be very, very careful of what they do. And it's now with the camera phones, with the internet, with social media, the way it is, it's you 24/7, you're under scrutiny, but you also have to look after your body in a way where that's your office. And I mean, Asmir will tell you now, I mean, what's it like these days? It must be, the testing must be incredible.
No, Robo, I mean, you've nailed it on the head. It's really now a 24/7, 365 gig. It's all day, every day. You're monitored from what you do when you arrive at the training ground to when you leave the training ground to what you do off the field, to make sure that you're ready to go for that Saturday. I think the demands on us players as well is bigger than ever. So with the amount of games, and obviously if you're an international player and playing in the European games as well, it's just nonstop. So, it takes an awful lot of commitment and hard work to stay at the highest level, and obviously give yourself a chance to do this for a long time. So it's much different. I mean, you're right. I remember when I was a young pro, and you'd sort of do a good Monday, Tuesday, and you have a Wednesday off, and then you sort of start focusing on the game really. And we had team nights on a Tuesday or even on a Monday, and then work it off on a Tuesday type thing. Whereas that just doesn't really work that way anymore. And rightly so, because of social media and people criticizing you, and you have to be more wary of results, and have to be, I think, incredibly self-aware. I think that's maybe sometimes where players get into trouble, and whether we think it's right or wrong, it's just obviously the situation we're in. I've been part of teams that have been more successful, and you get away with doing a little bit more, whereas it's not quite going your way. People will be on you right away, and you try and keep that attention away from you as much as you possibly can. So the game has changed incredibly. I think in a right way. I think if you can put out some of the product that's out there now and the way the games are being played, then it's a beautiful thing to watch. So it's definitely changed big time from when we came in. But I guess going back a little bit to that, I think your first contract, £37.50. I mean, you're gonna have to have I know it's an apprentice wage, but your agent's gonna have to have a word. You have to have a word with him.
you couldn't have agents then when we were 16. I mean, it was there's your contract, take it or leave it. When we went in at 16, it was a case of you were coming out the under 15s, going to the under 16s, and I remember it clear as yesterday. So all the parents are sat in the cars waiting to be called into this meeting room. Basically, if you came out of the meeting room with a tracksuit in your hand, you were in. If you didn't have a tracksuit, you knew that was it. So you'd see some of the lads walk out with tracksuits. You're thinking, I'm surprised he's got one. And you're just waiting for your turn to get in.
It's Robo. Do you know what you say that though? And I say it a little bit jokingly. It's a bit of banter, but that sort of stuff's gone out the game, and I think it's actually not the best thing that's happened, because, as you rightly say, I remember signing my first apprentice. It's not a negotiation; it's a take it or leave it. This is what you're getting offered. But you were so happy to get that 60 quid a week or whatever it was, that you couldn't even you wouldn't even think of, oh my goodness, what else can I get? It's just that's what you're getting. Every single first year scholar is on the same money, and that's what you're doing. And all those jobs you do on the side is to ground you, is to keep you humble, is obviously to keep you motivated and hungry to then get to the next level where someone else is doing it for you. So all that stuff's gone out the game, and I think it's something that, you know, I wish was still around, but, you know, with the times that we're in, it's going to be impossible to get back. But there we go. That's the game we are today. Like going on to Leeds, you go on there to have an incredible career. You win Player of the Year in 2003, and obviously Supporters Player of the Year in 2004. How would you look at that whole Leeds experience as a whole? I know there's obviously incredibly high times, but obviously a couple of difficult situations as well.
It's a club that's really close to my heart. I still live in Harrogate now, so I do a lot of work for the club, spend a lot of my time there. And in all honesty, I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't for Leeds. I mean, I was there from the age of 13 to 23, so I was there for 10 years, 7 as a pro. And that gave me the grounding and the opportunity to be a professional footballer. Saw some very, very good times and some very, very bad times. I was there from the start when, you know, it broke into the team. Howard Wilkinson was my first manager. He first signed me as a youngster. And then we went through a few managers and we got to the Champions League semi-final, as you know. And then I was there for the whole decline. I was kind of, me and Alan Smith and Mark Viduka were the last 3 out the door of the fire sale. So over that period of time, I've seen some extremely good highs. We had a young team, a young, fearless team, like Harry Kewell, Alan Smith, Jonathan Woodgate, Rio Ferdinand, you know, Michael Bridges, Robbie Fowler was in that team. We had, you know, an eclectic mix of talent. It was fantastic. But it was just a really difficult time after the Champions League semi-final when things didn't go according to plan. And at that time, as players, we didn't have a clue what was to ensue after that. You know, the financial strain that the club was under. And do you know what? There's a lot of talk about the Champions League semi-final. Everybody says, oh, Leeds' failure was not winning the Champions League that year. I think if the truth be known, the actual failure was not qualifying for Europe that year. Because of the Champions League, we took our eye off the ball. And in the league, we didn't even get a European spot. So I think that was the actual crux of the problem. The Champions League semi-final, yes. But then next season, no European football. So the debt couldn't be furnished with the income that was coming in.
Some club leads, isn't it? And those Champions League nights at Ellen Road, what were they like, Paul? I'm quite intrigued to know what the atmosphere was like, because there's such passionate fans there, aren't they? I've seen a lot of football fans this season, and the Leeds fans are, wow.
Even now in the Premier League, win, lose or draw, you see the support that club's got. The term sleeping giant's been used far, far too often. But in Leeds' term for 16 years, they really were a sleeping giant. Regardless of what league they were in and who they were playing, Ellen Road would be full. First game of the season, regardless of who they were playing against. The Champions League nights were something special, something that lived with me forever, but not just home. The away nights were even more special. You know, they travelled in the thousands. I think there was 10, 15,000 there in the San Siro when we drew with AC Milan. And the support that they gave you, and it was unrivaling support. It was unwavering support as well. You know, it's difficult if you're not playing well, and at the time where we got relegated, listen, it's going to be hard even for the most diehard of fans to be screaming and shouting and cheering you on when you bottom the league, conceding 5 or 6 goals every week, and the club's got no money. It's a difficult situation. But you look at the support that club's got, not just in the UK, but all around the world, globally. And I think the impact that they've had on the Premier League in the last 2 seasons, everybody can see that. And it's funny, actually, because they've fast gone from one of the most hated teams in the UK to everyone's second favourite team under Bielsa. You know, the way that they play, and the fans have endeared themselves to everybody else. And it really is. The Premier League is a better place for Leeds United But at the moment, let's not go there with Asmir sat there, because it could be one of two, or Burnley as well. So let's not go there with that discussion at the moment.
Well, let's move that on very quickly then. To not give anyone any trouble. You mentioned those difficult times, and of course that's what happens in football. And if the business side doesn't match up with everything, then it becomes a difficult time. I was part of a fire sale at Portsmouth, and the club went, down the drain almost very, very quickly. Your next stop in your career is Tottenham Hotspur, and I remember it at the time, but I had to look it up again. For 1.5 million. What an absolute. Look back now, I don't think people talk enough. And one of the bargains of the 2000s. It's just 1.5 million for yourself to go to Spurs, and obviously what you did for Spurs after that in England. 1.5 million is incredible value for money. So well done to Spurs for being able to get that deal.
You played 175 games as well for Spurs.
Yeah.
He's a shrewd businessman, is Daniel Levy.
Yeah.
There you go. But that he is, that's for sure. But you go on to Spurs. How did you feel about going to Spurs and again joining another big club?
It was a big move for me because I was still only young. I was 23, 24. I think I was 23 at the time. And obviously the time at Leeds had been difficult. But I'll tell you a quick story, that the deal was actually done in the January, in the transfer window, in the winter transfer window. So Leeds were desperately trying to get money in at the time. So Tottenham put in a bid for me in January. Leeds accepted the bid. And the idea was that I would go to Spurs, but then they would loan me back, because I don't think Spurs had a lot to play for that season. They didn't have a manager. It was David Pleat at the time. So I went down to Spurs in January, did my medical, agreed my contract, did everything with John Alexander and Daniel Levy, my agent at the time. And I'm thinking, right, okay, I'm going to be a Spurs player. So it gets to about 10, half 10, transfer deadline, as we see on Sky Sports, the whole news flash coming up. And then the phone call comes from Leeds, deals off. And we're like, why? What's going on? And the rule at the time was you can only have a certain amount of players on loan. So I think they had their quota of foreign players on loan and the quota of English players on loan. So if they were to sell me to Spurs at the time, they couldn't loan me back. And at the time, the goalkeeping situation wasn't strong enough to let me go. So we were still in the Premier League at that time. So my contract was almost signed in January. And then it had to be put in the safe and put a lid on it. So Daniel Levy turned around to me. He said, look, don't worry, it's not dead in the water. You go back to Leeds, enjoy your football between now and the end of the season, and we'll revisit it in the summer. And you know what? He was good to his word. He came back, we sat down, redid the contract, and he signed me in the summer. And that's after going back to Leeds in the second half of the season, getting relegated and shipping about 60 goals between the first lot of talks and the second lot of talks.
That's unbelievable.
And I think to get someone of your stature, that time, at that age, it still made absolute sense to do the deal. So fair play to him. But you go from a difficult time at Leeds, you finished obviously the way it is, but then you go on into Spurs, and a club with big ambitions. So did you feel like it was the right move at the right time?
Yeah, it was for me. It was time to leave Leeds. I think the financial situation was apparent and for all to see. And I was the last of three, if you like, that had any kind of value. Because when we finished that season at Leeds, we got relegated. Like I said to you then, it was a mix of loan players, academy players, with 3 or 4 of us in the side that had any kind of value, and we were the last ones out the door, if you like. So the Tottenham move, it was a big move for me. I was born and bred in Yorkshire. Leeds was my team, and for me, with a young family at 23, it was difficult move to London, but absolutely loved it. The best four and a bit years of my career I spent at Tottenham. Happiness where we lived, very, very settled. Loved living in London, loved being able to dip in and out of the city. The club was brilliant. The staff, everything there. It just seemed to fit straight away. I didn't go initially as a number one because Casey Keller was there. But I played a couple of games in pre-season and that was it. I started as the number one. And from then on, I never looked back. It was just brilliant for me there until the last, the end of the last season that I spent there. I had, 4 very, very happy years there. And I probably played my best football there.
When you reflect upon your time there, is there like a standout game or period of time there that really you sort of play it back and you was really memorable?
Yeah, obviously winning the trophy. It's well documented that Spurs haven't won anything for a long time. The last time they won a trophy, it was a dinosaur like me that had my hands on it.
Yeah.
So, And it came at a difficult time for me because it was after the England-Croatia game when the ball went over my foot and it was deemed as a mistake, and my confidence took a huge hit, and I wasn't the same person nor goalkeeper for at least 12 to 18 months after that. And one day Ramos came into Spurs. At the time, Martin Jol left. One day Ramos came in, and we immediately didn't see eye to eye. And he had preconceived ideas in me in a similar way that Pep did with Joe Hart at Manchester City. He wasn't for him, and that was it. He was going to move him on. And the language barrier was difficult. I always responded well to man managers, managers that you could ask a question to. The door was always open. And with him, it was very, very difficult. It was his way. And when you wanted to speak to him, he couldn't understand you. So I was in and out of the team, which is difficult for a goalkeeper because, there is a number one, a number two, and a number three. That number twos come in and play in cup competitions, and your role, you accept your role. But with him, I didn't know where I stood. I wasn't playing well. My confidence was low. I'd come in, I'd do well, and he'd take me out again the week after. And that was during the point where the cup final was. And he put me back in for the cup final because it was a big game. And I played really well. And I knew that time that my time was up at Spurs. Because if he was sticking around, I wasn't. I didn't like him as a person, didn't like him as a coach, and we just couldn't get on. And at that point in my career and at my age, I wanted to be playing football. Hindsight, looking back, if I'd have stayed at the end of the season, 6 weeks later, he'd gone and Harry Redknapp was in. And Harry's a manager that I suspect that I would have loved working with, somebody that I would have responded to. So, but you don't know that at the time. I'm looking to get back into the England squad, looking to revitalise my career. And I can't see myself doing that while he's in charge at Spurs and I'm sat on the bench watching every other week. So going back to your original question, that made it so much more special for me because I had such a great relationship with the Spurs fans, such a happy time there. I knew that my time was coming to an end, but I was able to give that trophy back to them before I left.
Yeah, the fans love you there. I'm quite interested to talk to you about like the manner, like the relationship between the player and the manager. I guess as a goalkeeper, the goalkeeping coach is so important, but a relationship with the manager must be huge. I listened to a podcast with Aaron Ramsdale, and he was saying that Arteta's really got hold of him, puts his arm around him, makes him feel good. And his performances have probably reflected that. He looks like he's loved, he's looked after. How important is it? Question to both of you, your manager. It's vital, yeah?
Man management's the hardest part of managing footballers. I mean, if you look at the England manager's job, for example, picks a squad of 23 players. Majority of people would agree on 11 or 13 that would start every week. So a Premier League manager is exactly the same. Keep 11 players happy, easy, you pick them. It's how you keep the other 12 to 13 happy in the dressing room, because there's some that will understand why they're not playing. There's some that will not understand why they're playing. There's some that think they're better than others and they should be playing. There's some that won't understand the system that the manager's doing. And if things are going well, it's a lot easier to keep people happy. If things aren't going well, it spreads through the dressing room. Oh, training was rubbish today. This wasn't good today. That wasn't good today. So man management is so key, which is why in international management, I've always said, you don't need the world's best coach at international level because he gets 4 or 5 days with a team before the game. What you need is a coach that is able to set up a team, he's tactically aware to beat the opponent and get those 11 players to run through a brick wall for him, for want of a better phrase. Man management is the key at that level. I mean, you get that quality of players. In the Premier League, you get a quality squad of players. Anyone can put a team out. It's how you set that team out and what mentality you send those players out with.
That's a great answer.
I mean, I couldn't have put it better much myself, to be honest. Because Robo, I think you've nailed it on the head. I think man management is the biggest thing, especially. I wouldn't say in any age. Over the years, I think that's the sort of thing that's let a lot of managers down. I mean, figuring out what each individual most wants. Some guys, I'm a little bit like I like to just be left alone and I'd rather do my own thing and I know exactly what the manager expects. So obviously work closer with my goalkeeper coach to make sure I'm doing what I need to be doing. Whereas some guys, you talk about a Ramsdale who needs a little bit more attention or whatever it may be. So it's 100% the biggest thing in the game is for managers, and probably, as you rightly say, the best ones I've worked with have that side to them where they've looked after it a little bit better and they've just been a lot more honest with you and giving you the situation straight rather than obviously, playing around with it a little bit. So I couldn't agree more. Absolutely great point. But you mentioned Spurs, and I want to keep this, really focused on that next step. You're going to go to Blackburn, another big club, and play a lot of games for Blackburn and have some really, really good times there. So you've gone from up north back to London and back up north. How did it feel going to Blackburn and maybe under those circumstances with Spurs as well? It was obviously a welcome move.
Yeah, I was sad to leave Spurs, obviously, because of the relationship I had and the good time I'd had there. But like I say, at the time, I couldn't see myself playing, and I wasn't ready to sit on the bench and sit and watch football. So for me at the time, I signed for Blackburn. I signed for a club that actually finished above us in the league because we were struggling that year. One day Ramos was in charge. Spurs weren't in a great place. So the summer that I signed for Blackburn, I think they finished 6th or 7th in the Premier League, and Spurs were 10th or 11th. So in my eyes, looking at Blackburn, which was a solid family-run club back to the Jack Walker days, you look at the Premier League success that they've had, and they'd always been a solid Premier League club. And to go back up north, it was the wrong side of the country. It was the west side for me. We tried living in South Manchester for a year. We rented there for a year, but it was far too many footballers and footballers' wives. So we came back over to Yorkshire. And we had a house over here, and then I travelled over there. But no, I had some good times at Blackburn. It didn't work out with Paul Ince for whatever reason. And then Sam Allardyce came in, and I think he got me back to the level where I was at Tottenham. He's one of, if not the best manager that I worked with, as in like man management wise. And I just got on with him, and I just got him, and he understood me, and he could see where I was, and Sam just had a knack of doing that with players. You look at the players that he had at Bolton, like Campo, Okocha, Anelka, players like that. In a similar way that Sean Dyche does, he knows how to get the best out of players. And he made me realise there was more to football than just the training ground. There's a lifestyle, there's a gym, there's everything else that goes with it. And what's actually right for you isn't right for everybody. And just his way and the way that he was always there. He was always approachable. But at the same time, there was a discipline side to it as well, which I really liked and I really respected. He was very, very strict in the discipline side of things. And I think he got me back to playing the best football that I have. At the time, I'd retired from international football because there's another one there, Fabio Capello, who I didn't see eye to eye with. He left me out of the squads, and I wasn't ready to sit, traveling the world, sit watching from the stand, if you like. So they take 3 goalkeepers away on international duty. I was going to be his number 3 or number 4. So I was either not going to be in the squad. If there was an injury, I'd be in the squad, but then I'd train all week and then sit in the stand. And I thought at that stage in my career, I wasn't ready for that. And I retired from international football. But Sam got me back to a level around 2010, 2011, where there was calls for me to come out of international retirement because I was playing that well. And I credit that to him.
I remember him coming out actually saying he at that time, he said you were the best keeper in England at the time. You should be in the England squad. I want to kind of touch upon England actually and your time with England. How do you reflect upon your international career, Paul?
Unfulfilled. I think we had a golden generation, the so-called golden generation in 2006. You look at the players that we had, you look at the expectation that was around that squad. And I think for me, in hindsight, did I retire a little bit too early? Possibly, yeah. But like I said, with the move from Spurs, I don't just sit around. If something's not right, I'll move on. And for me, it was affecting me personally rather than football. It was affecting football as well, but personally, it was getting me down. I didn't used to like going away on international duty if I wasn't playing. And Fabio Capello, the way that he run the camp, it was a dictatorship. You all had to be down for dinner at a certain time, wearing a certain thing. And if you didn't finish dinner at a certain time, we finished, you had to wait for everybody to finish. So you'd be sat there for 2 or 3 hours while the little Italian masseur in the corner was still eating his rice pudding. And you're thinking, look, I just want to go to bed. I'm 34 years old. I want to go to bed. I want to do my own thing. And so that was the bit that brought it to a close for me, if you like.
Then you removed like ketchup from the table. You weren't allowed ketchup and certain things you weren't allowed to eat. And
he wasn't on his own. It wasn't just because of that. It was just because it was the dictatorship and the way that it was that I didn't enjoy the environment. So I took myself out of it. But as I say, about 2006 and before that generation of players that we had, I think if you look at football now, the way that managers are adaptive and the different systems they play, you look at the way Liverpool play, you look at the way City play, Chelsea, they have a style, they have a way of playing, a formation you expect, but they're not afraid to shift to 4 at the back, to 5 at the back, to 4 in midfield, to 3 up top. We played a rigid 4-4-2 under Sven-Göran Eriksson. Sven was a great manager, he was a great man manager, and he had a great rapport with the lads. But I think tactically he was maybe slightly naive in the way that regardless of what players we had and what players we had available, we played 4-4-2. So at times we'd have square pegs in round holes. We'd have Paul Scholes on the left wing, just so Frank Lampard and Steven Gerrard could play together in the middle. We have Michael Owen, Wayne Rooney, And you know, some of the best players, the players that we had to get into the team, but the formation he wanted to play, it was difficult for those players to play in certain positions. You couldn't get the best players in their best positions because there was too many of them.
Do you think, like, looking back on that, with a slightly different man in charge, things might have been slightly different there?
No, I don't know. I think looking back, I think the football's developed and it's evolved with the formations, with the style, with the high press, the low block, and all the new phrases that we've got now. That wasn't part of the game back then. I think the players that we had back then would be more than capable of doing that in today's systems.
There's some unbelievable players in that squad, didn't you? And David Beckham as a captain. What was Beck's like as a captain? Always intrigued me. He always seemed like quite a quiet guy.
No, he's very good. Yeah, very good. Very, very much a team man. Not quiet at all around the dressing room. Really good with the lads. And still, like, growing up, that generation is, for me, I was slightly younger than that generation, but it's still David Beckham. And you coming into that situation, into that scenario, I think he was a great leader. I think he spoke extremely well in front of the press. I think he took a lot of that away from the boys. At the time, I don't think he courted it, but I think there was a lot of press around him that wasn't to do with football. But you know, that wasn't through any fault of his own. He became a brand, and he became one of the world's best ever players, and it was just a privilege to be part of the squad and the teams that he played in.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look back at that England's team, and I was watching that Wayne Rooney film a while ago, and you think it was travesty how, you know, that generation didn't win anything, or, you know, even major finals. You would have thought they were right up there. And there's always something, an injury or something that never quite worked out in you guys' favor. So that was a shame. That was a shame, because those were some incredible teams. You were a part of, and obviously played your part in, which was amazing. There's a couple more questions. I know you finished your career with Burnley, Robbo, but I want to get a couple more questions in with you. As Martin said, when we look back at season 1 of our podcast, one of the things we really spoke about, and I think is important for a goalkeeper, is the goalkeeper coach and their relationship. What were some of the best goalkeeper coaches, or was there one that you remember really fondly that maybe helped make your career, or one you work with and you thought, yeah, this was the guy that I really enjoy working with the most?
I don't know if I enjoyed working the most, but I think made my career or made me as a person. You both know well, John Burridge. You've probably heard a lot of stories about John Burridge and what an absolute mad cat that he was. Everything you've heard about him is completely true, and probably most of it is unprintable, what you've heard about him. He was just absolutely goalkeeping crazy. He was obsessed, but at the same time, he was funny. He had such a unique character. His methods weren't by the textbook. His etiquette, let's say, around people wasn't exactly as it should be. So anyway, I signed for Leeds, and there was 2 second-year goalkeepers, and I was the first year when I left school when I was 16. So I went into a group of 3 goalkeepers, and I was the youngest of the 3. Eventually finished that season as the number 1, but leading up to that, John Burridge took one look at me, and he looked at me and he just went, "You're not tough enough." He said, "You're 6'4" and you're soft as whatever. And he said, "You need toughening up." He said, "You're going on loan to Durham City. This is in the Northern League." So me left school at 16, left mum and dad and everything else. I've got John Burridge there telling me I'm soft and I need toughening up, and I'm going to play in the Northern League or something. So the best thing was, Budgie lives in Durham. So I went on loan to Durham City for 3 months, I think it was, and I had to live with Budgie. So the club would pay me. They obviously didn't play every week. They didn't train every day, but they played every week. So I think training was 2 nights a week, and then they'd play on a weekend. But Budgie would have me in his house. Obviously, we'd train at Leeds early on in the week, and then later in the week, when Budgie wasn't in Leeds, I think he came in 3 days a week, we'd go and train at Newcastle's training ground at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And it wasn't until after I left Durham City did he tell me why that we were going at 5:30, 6 in the morning. So we'd leave his house, which was in the centre of Durham, go down to Newcastle's old training ground, which is now Durham University's sports fields, and we'd go to the little corner where there was a stile in the corner, jump over the hedge and just train in the corner for a couple of hours. And then when it got to about 8, 8:30, and people started coming to Newcastle's training ground, we'd put the balls in the bag quick, jump over the fence and go back to his house. And it wasn't till after he told me that he'd fallen out with everybody at Newcastle, he was banned for life from the training ground at the time.
That's cool, isn't it?
Unbelievable. You get these characters, and I think they're again, we go back to what we said earlier about apprentices and those principles, and they really brings things out of you, I guess, that you think back now and you think how genius it was. But, they know exactly the buttons to press and how to obviously get the best out of that talent, that potential. So when you moved on to the professional ranks, I mean, you played at some great clubs, obviously with England. Is there anyone else that sticks out goalkeeper coach wise, because I'm fascinated by these things, that you thought, okay, this guy was maybe even ahead of his time, I guess, when you look at what football is like now, but, someone you really, again, had a lot of respect for?
Yeah, I had a fantastic rapport with Hans Sagers at Tottenham. He got me, and he understood me, and he understood what made me tick. He knew that, like we spoke about before, about man management and understanding the individual. I don't know what your routine's like or how you feel after games, but after games, I always used to feel great the day after. And it was 2 days after the game that I didn't feel so great. So the night after a game, I'd probably struggle sleeping, but then I'd wake up the next day. And the older I got, I felt able to train the next day. So he would get me in and we'd do a really good session the day after a game. And then the second day after the game, he'd go, right, okay, just come out, play a bit of head tennis, go in the gym, do your bike work and go in the pool. And he understood me as an individual, and he tailored the sessions, not to my wants, but to my needs. We'd work extremely hard. He was old fashioned in that way. There'd be a lot of up and downs, a lot of top corners, bottom corners, but at the right time. He knew that I needed pushing. He knew the areas and the times that I needed pushing. But at the same time, he got to know me as a person, and he took the time to manage me through a week. And he wouldn't just come in today and go, right, I've got a session for all the goalkeepers today. He'd have a tailored session. So he'd take the two of us, the first choice and the second choice, and then Pat Jennings would come in. And Pat was fantastic. He was a great mentor. I mean, he wasn't able to coach at the level that Hans was. Was so interactive. But he'd come in and he'd take the youngsters, and then you'd have a shower when we finished and sit and have lunch with Pat Jennings, and you could just sit and talk to him. So I think my time at Spurs with the on the field stuff with Hans, and actually getting to know Pat Jennings as a person and a friend, it was a special time for me.
Absolute legend. Yeah, I mean, you talk about some big names in the game, especially in the goalkeeping world. So that's incredible insight. Thank you for sharing, Rob. And I guess we have to finish off because we are a goalkeeping product brand, AB1GK. We have to go on to the product, Martin, don't we?
We need to talk about gloves. Yeah. Do you remember your first? Yeah, I want to know what his first pair of gloves was, Asmir. Yeah. Always keen. It's one question I always like to ask a professional goalkeeper. Do you remember your first pair of gloves?
I think they were probably Sondico ones, in all honesty. I think when I first started out, I don't think the choice was that good. I remember when I was a really young kid, there was the material ones with the pimples on. But then I think my first serious pair of gloves were Sondico ones years and years ago, when the Sondico gloves, I think they were green and black, and they designed them with Sondico written down 2 fingers. So it's kind of a solid design with the Sondico down there. But the first real pair that I had professionally that was given to me was from Allsport. Remember the Allsport APGs? Yes. They were fantastic. They were a great glove. The old roll fingers. So John Lukic was the goalkeeper at Leeds. He used to wear them, the red and blue ones. But there was a grey and white flecked one, and it was the first ever glove that had like a stickiness to the palm. And there was a polythene layer. You had to pull the polythene layer off, and you couldn't wear them in pre-season. I learned a terrible lesson. So basically, the gloves have like a bit of sticker on, like a bit of adhesive on them, and they've got a layer of like cling film on them. So to wear them, you pull this layer of cling film off. So I did it in pre-season. I thought, oh, these are brilliant. I put my hands down on the grass like that, and the grass had just been cut, and we were in a foreign country on pre-season. Yeah, and like that, there's all grass cuttings stuck to my hands.
Oh no! Quality gloves, though. Quality gloves. When they were wet, they were really good, weren't they? From what I remember.
Yeah, the Allsports were, and that's where my love of the roll fingers came. I think they were the first ones that changed from the original flat palms, but now they've got the negative cut. You've got different fingers and different ways that players like them. None more stranger than Tom Heaton. I know how he likes his gloves cut in different ways, different sizes.
Tell us about it.
Different. He likes a thumb wrapped over, doesn't he?
Oh yeah.
It depends what day it is.
When you look back at all the gloves you've worn over the years, is there like a standout favourite of yours? You're a big Nike man for a period of time.
Yeah, I got the opportunity to work with Nike and develop their glove range. I wore the black gun cut gloves in the 2006 World Cup.
First ever goalkeeper to wear all black, weren't you?
Yeah, that was an
all-black
idea.
glove.
It was an idea that we came up with, me and the guy from Nike sat around my kitchen table. It was you've got the World Cup coming up in 18 months' time. What we're going to do, what we're going to wear. And I went, let's do something a bit different. And it was good. It was exactly the same glove, but we just had to source the latex and the palm and make sure that everything was exactly as was with the white gloves, but in a black version. And you look at the color of the gloves now. The black ones seem to have taken off. The orange ones, the green ones, they're all different colors. I was a traditionalist though, it was strange for me to sit there and go, yeah, we'll have an all black one, because I used to like simplicity. I just used to like white, and I used to like a very, very light backhand. But the companies that you work with, they obviously want to put their logo on them, their signage on them. And in some European competitions, there was a limit to the size of the actual sponsor's logo you could have. So when we were playing in Europe with Leeds and Spurs, you couldn't, the company couldn't put the full size logo that they wanted on. So you had to have gloves purposely made for European competitions.
Is that still a thing now, Asmir, with the sizing on logos and stuff on gloves?
Yeah. The sizing on logos, you have to. There's only so many logos you can have, and then obviously the sizing has to be right. If you see some of these games now, in the major tournaments, guys are putting tape on their gloves. So there's a bit of work that needs to go into it. Obviously, we have the World Cup and the Women's Euros to look forward to this year. So it's a bit of work that we need to do our end. But what Robbo might not know, Martin, I've got a little bit of a secret out here, is that in those mid 2000s, Robbo was one of the guys that I really looked up to. One of my role models, and I remember that Nike gun cut glove. So if you look at some of the photos of me playing in those years, when I was on loan at Yeovil and Bournemouth, I'm wearing the blue and white gun cuts because Robbo used to wear them.
That was why.
Robbo used to wear them. So he was one of my idols. I used to watch videos of him because we have a, similar, I always thought game. I was looking at guys that would, that thought where sort of my body shape a little bit I can relate my game to. So I was watching a lot of videos. So I remember that gun cuts very, very fondly because I used to wear him because of Robbo. So there we go. Now he's talking on our podcast, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's wicked.
Well, that's a huge honour, but at the same time, it also makes me feel very old as well. But thank you very much. My dad's still got a load of those gun cut gloves because every time that I played for England, he kept the shirt and the gloves from every game. They've gone a bit dry and crusty now. But my dad's got every single England shirt and every single pair of gloves, because when we played for it internationally, you get 2 shirts or 3 shirts for every game. So you'd swap one and you'd keep one. So I always kept my gloves and shirt from one of the games. So he's got every cap and every shirt and every pair of gloves from the games.
That's brilliant. That. Have you got to send us a picture on that? I'd love to see that.
Yeah, no problem. Getting to send a picture of him.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. That's quality. There's some good gloves in there as well.
Yeah, that's a heck of a collection. So, no, it's brilliant. Well, listen to Robbo. I mean, it's been an absolute honor to have you on our podcast. You do a lot of stuff for us as a brand, so we couldn't be more thankful to you for being part of it. I know you've got a son coming now through the ranks we look after, and we wish him all the very best. I hope he's got a huge future in the game. So, it's a pleasure to have you on here today, and sharing your story. It means a lot.
No problem. Absolutely. Yeah. Anytime for you guys. You know that.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much, Paul.
No worries.
Thank you very much for joining us today for the first episode in the season 2 of the AB1GK podcast. Absolutely delighted to sit down there with Asmir and Paul Robertson and talk about goalkeeping and look back on Paul's career. What a career he had. Played some serious games in the Premier League and went on to play at World Cups and European Championships. So a massive thank you to Paul Robinson for joining us. And make sure that you stay tuned and subscribe to us here on the AB1GK YouTube channel, where we'll be putting up our next episode of the AB1GK podcast in the next week. So make sure you subscribe, like us, give us a thumbs up, give us your comments in the box below as well. I look forward to hearing your feedback. Any questions that you think that you want us to be asking any of our guests, please do get them into us. And make sure you follow AB1GK on all the major social network channels, Instagram at AB1GK, Facebook at AB1GK, and also again on Twitter as well. Thank you very much for watching today, and I hope that you've enjoyed the first episode of the AB1GK podcast.